Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, world leaders gather in New York for the UN General Assembly, plus U.S. authorities deport many migrants as they gather under a bridge at the U.S.-Mexico border. Several days of speeches from heads of state and government began on Tuesday as the general debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly kicked off. Climate change, COVID-19 and security dominated discussions during the annual gatherings. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from the opening day.
World leaders gathered on Tuesday in New York City for the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Member states addressed two parallel challenges: ending the COVID-19 pandemic and redefining the post-pandemic global economy. The President of the UN General Assembly, Abdullah Shahid, who was sworn in on September 14th, opened the annual general debate reflecting on the darkest days of the pandemic.
My friends, there are moments in time that are turning points, and this is one such moment. We can choose a path of isolationism, of mutual destruction, of a slow retreat of human experiment, or we can forge together a new path, a sustainable and resilient path that changes the future of our planet. For the 7+ billion constituents around the world, this is what they see when they think of the United Nations. Iconic world leaders standing before a marble green backdrop, debating not whether to help, but how to help. Let us not let them down. We have never been so technologically advanced. We have never been so connected. We have never had the wealth, the resources, or the know-how that we have now. There's nothing in our path to stop us but ourselves. Let us be the United Nations that people want us to be.
We need more ambition.
In his opening remarks, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres reprimanded the world for the inequitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, describing it as an obscenity and giving the globe an F in ethics. He also warned that the nations need to work together on war, climate change, and the pandemic.
The world must wake up. We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction. We must get serious and we must act fast. Excellencies, COVID and the climate crisis have exposed profound fragilities as societies and as a planet. Yet instead of humility in the face of these epic challenges, we see hubris. Instead of the path of solidarity, we are on a dead end to destruction. At the same time, another disease is spreading in our world today, a malady of mistrust. When people see promises of progress denied by the realities of their harsh daily lives, when they see their fundamental rights and freedoms curtailed, when they see petty as well as grand corruption around them, when they see billionaires joyriding to space while millions go hungry on Earth, when parents see a future for their children that looks even bleaker than the struggles of today, and when young people see no future at all. The people we serve and represent may lose faith not only in their governments and institutions, but in the values that have animated the work of the United Nations for over 75 years. A majority of the wealthier world vaccinated, over 90% of Africans still waiting for the first dose. This is a moral indictment of the state of our world. It is an obscenity. We passed the science test, but we are getting an F in ethics. Excellencies, the climate alarm bells are also ringing at fever pitch. The recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was a code red for humanity. We see the warning signs in every continent and region: scorching temperatures, shocking biodiversity loss, polluted air, water, and natural spaces, and climate-related disasters at every turn. As we saw recently, not even this city, the financial capital of the world, is immune. Climate scientists tell us it is not too late to keep alive the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Climate Agreement. But the window is rapidly closing.
On behalf of the General Assembly,
Joe Biden delivered his first United Nations General Assembly speech as U.S. President and also pushed for a unified response to major issues, including climate change.
The extreme weather events that we have seen in every part of the world, and you all know it and feel it, represent what the Secretary General has rightly called Code Red for humanity. I know this. As we look ahead, we will lead. We will lead on all the greatest challenges of our time, from COVID to climate, peace and security, human dignity and human rights, but we will not go it alone. We will lead together with our allies and partners and in cooperation with all those who believe as we do that this is within our power to meet these challenges, to build a future that lifts all of our people and preserves this planet. But none of this is inevitable. It's a choice. And I can tell you where America stands. We will choose to build a better future. We, you and I, we have the will and capacity to make it better. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to waste any more time. Let's get to work. Let's make our better future now. We can do this.
The U.S. president also mapped out a new era of what he called vigorous competition without Cold War, promising restraint from the U.S. military.
The United States will compete and will compete vigorously and lead with our values and our strength. We'll stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones, whether through changes to territory by force, economic coercion, technical exploitation, or disinformation. But we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to shared challenges, even if we have intense disagreements in other areas, because we'll all suffer the consequences of our failure if we do not come together to address the urgent threats like COVID-19 and climate change, or enduring threats like nuclear proliferation.
Addressing the General Assembly, China's leader Xi Jinping said democracy is not a special right reserved to an individual country.
We must strengthen solidarity and promote mutual respect and win-win cooperation in conducting international relations. A world of peace and development should embrace civilizations of various forms and must accommodate diverse paths to modernization. Democracy is not a special right reserved to an individual country, but a right for the people of all countries to enjoy. Recent developments in the global situation show once again that military intervention from the outside and so-called democratic transformation entail nothing but harm. We need to advocate peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, which are the common values of humanity, and reject the practice of forming small circles of zero-sum games.
Iran's new president also rebuked the U.S. and showed little sign of flexibility on nuclear talks.
The United States mistakenly believed it would render us desperate and devastated, but our perseverance has yielded results and will always do. For the smart and dynamic resistance of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which comes from our strategic rationality, and we don't trust the promises made by the U.S. government. While decisively defending all its rights and interests of its people, Iran is keen to have large-scale political and economic cooperation and convergence with the rest of the world. I seek effective interaction with all the countries of the world, especially with our neighbors, and shake their hands warmly.
Meanwhile, on the sidelines, protesters gathered outside of the United Nations headquarters in New York to protest Iran's president's appearance at the General Assembly.
At the core of our efforts today is to express support for protests in Iran, for an 80 million population in Iran that does not want the regime, but it is living in absolute oppressive environment. it is incumbent upon the international community to engage the people of Iran and their organized resistance rather than continue fruitless negotiations with the dictators such as Raisi.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was also the target of another small protest in New York. The small crowd gathered outside the International Hotel, where Bolsonaro was reportedly staying. The far-right populist is a vaccine skeptic who's bragged about not being vaccinated, saying before he left for New York that his immune system is strong enough to fend off the coronavirus.
Away from the UNGA to the U.S. immigration crisis, authorities have deported many migrants from a Texas border town, which has seen an influx in recent weeks. About 12,000 would-be immigrants, many from Haiti, had gathered on a bridge at U.S.-Mexico border last week, hoping to enter the United States.
Ejected from Texas, these Haitians arrived back home this week. For many of the would-be migrants, it meant their search for a better life far away from their impoverished country was over.
I left Haiti to go find a better future, because here in Haiti, all of us young people, despite finishing our studies, we cannot get any work. We're on the streets with nothing.
I spent thousands of dollars to pay for the trip from Brazil, passing through Mexico to Texas. I could have invested the money here. I could have built a great business. It's not like we don't know how to do things. It's just there's no opportunity.
U.S. border agents began removing groups of mostly Haitian migrants over the weekend from a large makeshift camp they had set up after wading across the Rio Grande, separating Mexico and the U.S. state of Texas.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned. Your journey will not succeed, and you will be endangering your life and your family's lives. This administration is committed to developing safe, orderly, and humane pathways for migration, but this is not the way to do it.
The sprawling camp under the International Bridge attracted more than 12,000 people at one point. The makeshift camp has few basic services, so migrants are living in terrible conditions. Many of them had paid thousands of dollars and trekked from as far away as Brazil. On Tuesday, the Texas governor Greg Abbott warned illegal migrants that they risk going to jail. He also blamed the Biden administration for the crisis.
We are arresting and jailing anybody who comes across the border illegally and trespasses on private property or on public land. And so it's not the Biden administration catch and release policy. It's the arrest and jail policy, sending a message to these folks and anybody thinking about coming here. If they're thinking about coming and crossing this river here in Texas, you may wind up with handcuffs on your hands, going straight to jail.
The migrants had sought to petition U.S. authorities for entry and to escape the rampant poverty and gang violence afflicting the Caribbean nation. The United Nations says it's concerned at the deportations of migrants who may need asylum.
Like we are disturbed by the images we've seen and by the fact that we've seen all these migrants and refugees and asylum seekers being transported to Port-au-Prince. We are seriously concerned by the fact that it appears that there has not been any individual assessment on the case, and that therefore maybe some of these people have not received the protection that they needed. What we always repeat is no matter who you are, regardless of your migration status, everyone has the same rights and have the right to have the same protection.
Meanwhile, images which appear to show border agents on horseback driving migrants back to a river like cattle have sparked an investigation in the U.S. The U.S. government has been facing the surge of migrants arriving at the border. Earlier this year, it was reported that the number of migrants detained at the U.S.-Mexico border in July exceeded 200,000 for the first time in 21 years. And last month, the authorities arrested more than 195,000 migrants at the Mexican border. This summer's numbers represent a significant increase from the 51,000 arrested in August 2019.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, China celebrates Mid-Autumn Festival with colourful performances. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. South Africa's coastal city Durban is signed on the dotted lines as the host city for the second edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair. Present at the ceremony was Nigeria's former president, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the president of the Afrexim Bank, Professor Benedict Orama, and representatives of the African Union. The event, which was previously hosted by Egypt, will be held in South Africa in November. This year's theme is Building Bridges for a Successful African Continental Free Trade Area.
Building Bridges for a Successful African Continental Free Trade Area is the theme of the second edition of the Intra-Africa Trade Fair 2021. South Africa has signed on the dotted lines to host at a ceremony at the International Conference Centre in Durban. For the chief host, KwaZulu-Natal Premier Sihle Zikalala, hosting this event marks a new beginning and also shows that Africa is taking a leap post-COVID-19 into industrialization.
Africa is ready to take its gigantic leap post-COVID-19 into industrialization. For us, this also will ignite the economy as it will contribute to sustaining jobs as a number of hospitality facilities have been closed for a long period. It will also give hope and a boost to the province as it will also contribute directly to the economy of the city and the province.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we at Afrexim Bank are proud to be contributing to this new chapter. In 2018, we celebrated the first edition of the Inter-African Trade Fair, which was held in Cairo, Egypt. The fair, which was among the first practical deliverables of the AfCFTA agreement even before it came into force, was a resounding success, as Ambassador Muchanga highlighted. It brought together over 1,000 exhibitors and generated more than $32 billion in business deals.
The Chairman Advisory Council for the Intra-Africa Trade Fair and Nigeria's former president, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, in his speech, said having an agreement is one thing, but implementing it is another. But initiatives like this trade fair is one of the practical ways to walk the talk for the continent's developmental aspirations.
The trade fair is one of the practical ways of bringing the trade and market information, of bridging the trade and market information gap. We urge the business community to take advantage of IATF 2021 and use it to explore business opportunities. Africa needs the IATF more than ever to jumpstart our economies and help us recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
The IATF 2021 comes up from the 15th to the 21st of November, and $40 billion worth of trade and investment deals are expected among more than 10,000 expected attendees. As the world would not be in a hurry to forget the civil unrest witnessed in KwaZulu-Natal and Johannesburg in July this year, we asked the leaders of the province what assurances they're giving to those who hope to attend.
So the security arrangements are now there. We are ready to host major events of this magnitude, and we've been showcasing that we've got capacity and capabilities as a city to host major events.
The first edition of the IATF was held in Cairo, Egypt in December 2018, and this second edition will include a 4-day conference comprising main and high-level panel sessions to discuss business opportunities. There will also be training covering exporting, standards and marketing.
Still in South Africa, a business group has lodged a court application to compel the South African government to disclose its grounds for the continued COVID-19 state of disaster, disaster management and lockdown levels. The group claims the state of disaster has seen nearly 2 million people being unemployed and livelihoods lost. The country recently moved to adjusted alert level 2 lockdown restrictions, and the move has been met with a bittersweet reaction.
There has been an outcry in South Africa over the continued national state of disaster. From political parties who are gearing up for the upcoming local government elections, to churches who like to have more congregates, to even business groups who have gone as far as filing a court order.
We lodged an application with the High Court in Gauteng to obtain the records on which Minister Dlamini Zuma based their decision over these past 18 months, actually the multiple decisions regarding lockdown, the levels of lockdown, the various restrictions. What is the basis on which the lockdown decisions are being made? And that is what we want to see, and that is what we think is imperative for a good decision to be made, public scrutiny.
To take the nation a step closer to normal, government recently moved the country to adjusted alert level 2. Medical practitioners do believe it's early days to end the national state of disaster and have called for caution.
I think we have to be a bit a bit cautious, in our calls for a complete removal of the lockdown restrictions. I think we got our fingers burnt the first time we had a first wave last year, and it seemed as if there was a significant decline in infections, only to have a second wave towards December holidays when things were quite restricted. So I think people have termed it quote unquote the new normal. The new normal is a delicate balance between how do we ensure that we break this community transmission in the country, at the same time trying to balance the need for citizens to be involved in economic activities to sustain the country economically.
Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa, responding to a written parliamentary Q&A, said all organs of state must develop sustainable regulatory measures for the control of COVID-19 before the state of emergency regulations can be lifted.
And finally on the program, let's head over to Asia now, where several people this week celebrated one of the most important traditional festivals in the Chinese calendar, the Mid-Autumn Festival, also known as the Moon Festival. After more than 18 months of gloom brought on by the coronavirus pandemic, this year's Mid-Autumn Festival was extra special with a visual feast from China presented to global audiences. Take a look.
The Mid-Autumn Festival Gala, consisting of 3 chapters, offered a blend of traditional elements and advanced technologies, showcasing a panoramic picture of Chinese culture and history. It was simultaneously broadcast overseas for the first time. The first part of the gala, themed Moon Rises to Mid-Autumn, attracted audience with various elements of traditional Chinese culture. It included songs of a traditional Chinese poem about the Mid-Autumn Festival and modern songs integrated with traditional Chinese styles to show affection for the country and family, and songs praising dream seekers. The second part was themed Moon and Hometown. In this part, children from Daliang Mountains, Liangshan Yi Autonomous Prefecture, once one of the poorest places in China, were invited to sing a song called Just Like You to express their gratitude and delight at being lifted out of poverty. Themed The Full Moon and the Realization of Dreams. The third part of the TV gala included singing and dancing performances and the presence of Olympic champions and gifts from space. The 3-part gala was recorded earlier this month in Xichang in southwest China's Sichuan province and home to the Xichang Satellite Launch Center. Since the gala was first broadcast live by China's Central Television in 1991, it has become overwhelmingly popular among the Chinese diaspora and is now one of the most popular festive TV shows with hundreds of millions annual viewers worldwide. The Mid-Autumn Festival falls on the 15th day of the 8th month of the Chinese lunar calendar, which is September 21st this year. It's observed by East and Southeast Asian countries including North Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and South Korea. The Mid-Autumn Festival is an important time of the year for family reunions. People usually visit lantern shows, fly balloon lanterns, or have dragon boat races to celebrate the festival.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Stay safe.